And we're back with more News Talk Saga 960. So very glad that you could join us on this edition of the Mark Petronis Show. Well, as Tamara Lich headed back to jail, she's already spent about 18 days behind bars, but now the Crown wants Tamara back behind bars. This is the lady, of course, who helped organize the convoy protest. And now the Crown says that tomorrow should be returned to jail to await trial. Why? Well, apparently because she's going to Toronto or is planning to attend a ceremony in her honor where she's going to be receiving the Freedom Award, the George Jonas Freedom Award. And I guess the authorities are so angry about that, I guess that they are now planning to arrest her for violating bail. Let's bring in our expert in the area of policing, security, and so forth. He's also a terrific content producer. He's got a fantastic website, primetimecrime.com. Leo Knight, welcome to the show, Leo.
Thanks very much, Mark.
All right, so you brought this to my attention. I do appreciate it because Tamara has already spent, as you mentioned, 18 days behind bars for a mischief charge.
That's correct. She's been charged with counseling mischief, and I'm not even sure how the Crown got to that charge and where the mischief is, but presumably they're going to say that the mischief was actually trucks blocking Ottawa streets, but that's a legal argument I'm not sure they're going to be able to make. But anyway, she was released on bail after 18 days in jail, which I might add, if you commit a crime in Ottawa or Toronto tomorrow and get arrested and go before a judge, the chances of you being sentenced to 18 days in jail for whatever crime, unless it involved a gun or a very bad assault or something like that, there's not a chance you're going to go to jail.
What a terrible drawing of her. I guess that's a court drawing, but the story in CTV is Crown prosecutors want Ottawa protest organizer Tamara Lich sent back to jail to await trial, claiming she breached her bail conditions by agreeing to participate in an event next month where she will receive a Freedom Award. So the mere act of agreeing to do something is a rationale, is a pretext for arresting somebody. She hasn't even actually done it yet.
No, this whole thing is moronic, and it has been from the outset. Now, Mark, you know me, and you know I'm a law and order guy.
Of course.
But what she is being, what she's going through throughout all of this, the criminal charges, being held in jail, what the Crown is now saying is all totally ridiculous. The reason that she's going through it is because she embarrassed Justin Trudeau. There's no other reason for any of this. She's been charged criminally with a made-up charge that I can see. She's been given bail after 18 days in jail. One of the conditions of the bail, I believe, was to remain in her home in Calgary, and she's going to go to Toronto to get the George Jonas Freedom Award. And because that's been announced, they're now saying that she should be brought back to court, appear before a judge, and the Crown's going to seek her imprisonment until such time as her trial occurs, which could be 6, 12, 18 months into the future. I mean, it's ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. It's bloody embarrassing for the Crown. And in my opinion, it's embarrassing for the Prime Minister.
What a disgrace.
An absolute disgrace. Good word.
Justin Trudeau doesn't need any help in embarrassing himself. I mean, he can do that all by his lonesome. Lich was arrested, according to the story, in Ottawa in February after the federal government invoked the Emergencies Act. She was charged with multiple offenses related to the protest, including mischief and operating or obstructing a police officer. I mean, she's like 5'0" isn't she? I mean,
yeah, that's right.
The idea that she was going to do anything to a cop, that's ludicrous.
The whole thing is ludicrous. But even the pretext under which she's been arrested, the whole Emergencies Act, Mark, I mean, we heard last week from the commissioner of the RCMP that the RCMP didn't ask the government to impose the Emergencies Act. We know that the government, in the guise of Marco Mendocino, the public safety minister, and I believe the prime minister has said all along that the police, generically speaking, they wouldn't identify which police agency, asked them for the Emergencies Act to be imposed. Well, today, Steve Bell, the acting chief of the Ottawa Police, even testified that he didn't ask them for that act to be imposed either. So if the RCMP didn't and the Ottawa Police didn't, who did?
Yeah, exactly. And here's a story in the National Post. Ottawa police say they didn't ask for Emergencies Act as Liberals defend its use. The quote in the story in the National Post: "We sought the advice of law enforcement. They gave us feedback on precisely what those powers were, and following that advice, we invoked the Emergency Act." Now, let's listen to this quote here. "We sought the advice of law enforcement. They gave us feedback on precisely what those powers were." Well, why would they rely on police to give them details on what those powers were? I mean, this is a government action, first of all. But the police, I mean, as I understand it, not only were they not asked about this, and they didn't give advice suggesting, yeah, I think we should do this, but here it goes further. The government is suggesting that the police gave them feedback on what the powers were, and following that advice, they invoked the Emergencies Act. So, as I see it, the police are saying, you know what, we're not going to wear this for you. And now another police force, the Ottawa police force, has said, you know what, throw somebody else under the bus. And so every time somebody does this, the government looks less and less credible. Not that they have a whole lot of credibility on this issue anyway, but the fact that it's their word against the police's word, it's like he said, she said, and the government is looking more and more like they didn't get any kind of advice from the police suggesting they do this. So
Yeah.
somebody is
Well,
lying here, Leo.
at best, Mark, there were a number of meetings that occurred in Ottawa that senior police managers from various forces attended with a bunch of bureaucrats from the Justice Ministry, or sorry, the Public Safety Ministry, and likely the PMO. Those meetings did occur. Did any police officer in those meetings say, you should do this? Well, they've all said under oath in testimony before the Commons Committee that no, they did not say that to the government. So the government's out on their own here. They're standing on the plank, and the ship of state seems to be sailing on quite happily with them out there on the plank.
I mean, there's supposed to be some, well, we know that there is a review. I mean, there's supposed to be a review, I think within what, 90 days of the
There's supposed to
imposition.
be a review, but don't forget, the act never really became enforced. Now, this is where you could argue and picking nits within the law, because the Senate has to approve the act or the imposition of the act, and the Senate had only just started hearings when the government withdrew the act. So the Senate never actually heard all they wanted to hear, nor came to any conclusions or recommendations. So the act, if one wants to pick nits, as I say, the act was never actually officially imposed.
All right. So what happens if the reasons for the Emergencies Act don't hold water? So, in other words, we've got the guy who's overseeing this inquiry, and he's getting conflicting evidence here, conflicting reports. The cops say, we didn't suggest it. The police say, oh, yes, they did. And that's why we did it.
Well, the actual inquiry that's to be done by a liberal insider, which is supposedly independent, hasn't yet started. What we're seeing right now is the Commons Committee that is reviewing what the government did in this particular case. And that's where the statements by the police chief of Ottawa, the acting police chief, and the commissioner of the RCMP have come from.
And here's a comment by Cody Brown. I think we all know the Liberals have zero evidence to back up their decision enforcing the Emergencies Act. If the review comes out saying that was unlawful, what will the repercussions be? Which was kind of my question. And I think Cody puts it better than I did. What happens if there is no justification
Nothing.
for it? I mean,
absolutely nothing. It'll be a political black eye for the prime minister, but he weathers those the way you and I chew Tic Tacs. He doesn't care. If the Commons Committee or the supposedly independent civilian inquiry looks into this and says the government shouldn't have done it, they'll say, "Oh well, we'll know better next time." Nothing will come of it.
meantime, we have the Public Safety Commissioner, Marco Mendicino, coming out. And, well, he's talking about guns and he's talking about the failure of previous conservatives. I guess he's suggesting that the Tories have always been weak on guns. The tweet, Marco Mendicino's tweet is, "What does it take to keep Canada safe from gun violence? Common sense measures to stop crime, fight illegal traffic at the border," which the Liberals have utterly failed to do.
Utterly.
Invest in our communities to tackle root causes. We're taking strong action. As for the Conservatives, well, Marco says that's not happening. They have failed. He says they are weak on this. So, I mean, to the degree that he has a point, let's listen a little bit to what he has to say.
Mr. Speaker, I'm just wondering when Conservatives are going to understand what it takes to keep Canadians safe as it relates to gun violence. That means introducing common sense measures to make sure that guns don't fall into the hands of the wrong people. That means making sure that we support law enforcement so we can stop illegal trafficking at the border. That means making sure that we invest in our communities, Mr. Speaker, so that we can prevent gun crime from occurring in the first place. The Conservatives are weak on all of those measures, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, but it seems to me that Marco and his government are going after legal firearms owners. That was not part of his little rant there, Leo, but it seems to me that the Liberals are much more interested in going after and targeting legal firearms owners in Canada than they are in doing any of this.
That's all they've
stuff that you just
ever
talked
been
about.
interested in. They don't care about gun crime. I mean, let's be realistic, Mark. Ever since the École Polytechnique shooting in, I think, what was that, 1989, they have been they tried the long gun registry. They're trying everything they can do. Trudeau came out after the Port-au-Pic shootings in Nova Scotia in 2020. He came out and ruled that over 1,000 different types of long guns were illegal now, suddenly illegal. So if you owned one, you went from being totally law-abiding with all your paperwork in place and your approval by the RCMP to a criminal overnight, just because Justin said so. That's what the Liberal government has been doing about gun crime. How the guns that are being smuggled in daily across the American-Canadian border, they're not doing a thing about that. And most of the guns, I will tell you this, come in through the Oknasaasni Reserve in Ontario, which straddles the U.S.-Canada border just south of Cornwall. That is an absolute open, I don't know what, call it a cesspit, if you will, of criminal activity.
It's a sieve for allowing, and now as we've spoken in the past about the use of drones to bring these in.
Yeah, but they won't. The government will not do anything that might attack the First Nations on that reserve. That anything being seen as against what the First Nations people want to do, the government will not do. So therefore, the members of that particular First Nations who are engaged in criminal smuggling are making a heyday. They're making a fortune and getting all the guns that the gangs want in all of our cities in Canada. And the shootings occur and are going on willy-nilly. And the likes of Marco Mendicino sits there in the House and wags his finger and flaps his gums, but does absolutely nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
against
interesting to
gang
look
and
at
gun violence.
It's interesting to look at the numbers, but because he says that the Tories did nothing on gun violence and that the Liberals are, looking at common sense solutions, but you look at the numbers of homicide related shootings, or the number has not declined since the Liberals got in. They got in 2015. So if we give that to the Tories, say that's when they were done, is 100. There were 180. The very next year, there were 223. Year after that, 267. It leveled off to 251, 264. And 2020, we're up to 277. So that's not exactly a record that you want to hang your hat on.
2021 will be worse, I'll guarantee it.
Leo Knight joining us on Saga 960 with his discussion on a number of topics, including gun crime, the increase in the number of guns, what I feel is a misplaced policy by the government to target legal firearms owners. And then when they get asked about it, well, they respond by saying that it was the Tories who were weak. And we've seen the numbers, and they do not paint a very good picture of the Liberal Party's record on gun crime, Leo. And
we have to extend this argument just a little bit further, if you'll permit me, Mark.
Of course.
It's not just homicides committed by people with guns, gangs with guns. 2 days ago in, I believe, Etobicoke or possibly Mississauga, I may have my geography inaccurate, one of the Toronto Maple Leafs was hijacked at gunpoint.
That's right.
And his car, a Range Rover, was stolen, and he was left on the pavement. That gun crime, fortunately, did not result in a homicide. That particular player, fortunately, is still alive and alive enough to tell the police what happened to him. That does not happen in every case. But nevertheless, that's still a gun crime. It was committed with a handgun, undoubtedly an illegal handgun, brought into this country illegally, sold illegally on the black market to a gang member, and then used in a crime. That is the real problem in cities, whether it's Toronto we're talking about, or Winnipeg, or Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver. It doesn't matter. Illegal guns are the problems. The weapon that you or I may have in our homes that we've got with our, having done all the proper paperwork, having had our background checks by through the RCMP, and all that, that's not what the problem is. Yet that's what the Liberal government are going after. Those are the folks the Liberal government seem to think that it's creating part of the gun problem in this country. Well, it's not. There's not a single crime that I can think of committed in the last 10 years. I'll even give the Liberals and Mendicino a bit of a gift here, going over 4 years of the Conservative government. There's not a single crime I can think of committed with a legally registered weapon in this country. Not one.
It's a shocking stat. Let's talk a little bit about the ongoing travel bans, which, to their credit, the Tories continue to hammer the government on. This tweet by True North, Melissa Lansman cites this is a member of Parliament, Conservative, cites a number of organizations and experts who are calling on the feds to drop the travel restrictions. She says, or she asks Prime Minister Trudeau, who is advising the government to keep the restrictions? Let's listen.
The honourable member for Thornhill.
Speaker, international arrivals at Canadian airports are so backed up that people are being kept on planes for hours after they land because there isn't enough space for the long lineups. His minister blames travelers, and the world has embraced restriction-free travel. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce, the Airports Council, and now health experts are telling this government that their outdated COVID restrictions have to go. Who's actually telling the government to keep those restrictions?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, over the past months, Canadians continue to die at a higher rate than during the first 2 years of COVID-19.
Okay, so I'm going to stop him right there.
Oh, thank you very much. I was hoping you wouldn't make me listen to his blather.
I'll go back. I have to go back to it, though, to let him finish. But here's my question to you. I mean, if there are more people dying now than there were in the first 2 years of the pandemic, why are we still using the same failed policies? Why are these people doubling down on policies that didn't work, that have actually maybe even making the problem worse in terms of the number of fatalities, at least according to his logic? I don't necessarily buy the premise of what he's saying, but based on what he is saying, does it make sense to continue the same policies that have failed so miserably?
Well, there's a few parts to that answer, Mark. In the first place, let me just say this. Canada is the only country on the planet that still has any mandates in place. Now, let me say that again for you. We are the only country on the planet that still has mandates in place.
Well, China was up until just days ago.
Hang on.
I mean,
what China does in Shenzhou, I don't think factors into a Western discussion. In the first instance, then we have to look at where the virus came from in the first instance, and that was from Wuhan in China. So, and I'm not yet convinced that it wasn't done deliberately, but that's kind of a sidebar issue. Getting back to this, we also have to take into account that the CDC is already, today they said that maybe as many as 25% of the deaths that they ascribe to COVID may have been unrelated. 25%. Right. And I'd bet you the number is a lot higher than that. We've been lied to out of the gate about all of this, Mark. The bulk of the deaths are for people, Frank, look at the stats. They're people or over 80. Now, the life expectancy in this country is only 78.5.
Different for men and women, but I take your point.
It's the life expectancy is lower than the average age of a person who's died with a COVID virus. This whole thing is nuts. It's a manufactured crisis, and we've absolutely destroyed the Canadian economy for nothing more than the tissue of lies that the Liberals have formed, and they keep perpetrating on us, and they will not let it go. And why that is, I don't know. China accepted, and I'll give you that. We're the last country on the planet that has any mandates.
Well, the Prime Minister himself said that the pandemic was an opportunity. And so that window of opportunity
for him to wear a mask for however long. He didn't wear a mask last week when he was in the Ukraine. As soon as he comes back to Canada, he's got the mask on his face again.
He's absolutely ridiculous. And they have a far lower vaccination rate in Ukraine than they do in Canada. So nothing he says makes any sense, except that he did say that the pandemic was an opportunity, and that window of opportunity is going to close. And so he's doing everything he can to push through that reset to make sure that the opportunity is not wasted. These guys are all about never let a good crisis go to waste. Let's listen to the rest of what he has to say.
The pandemic is still with us, and we need to continue to do what is necessary based on science to keep people safe. In regards to airport delays, we're hiring about 400 additional security screeners. We've added 25 kiosks at Pearson Airport to speed up processing time, increased overtime available to officers. It's a good thing that Canadians are starting to travel again, and we will be there to support them.
Unless you're somebody who hasn't gotten the shots, in which case... no, you're not traveling out of the country. You're not flying out of the country. You're not taking a train. You're not even flying domestically.
Yeah, you're talking.
I mean, what the hell is he talking about? It's good that Canadians are traveling again.
I don't know what he's talking about at the best of times, Mark. frankly, between you and me and your audience, he's an absolute fool. It pains me to listen to him, and it pains me that he's the prime minister of my country.
Yeah, and continues to be because of, I think, to a no small due to the fact that the NDP continues to prop him up.
Well, absolutely.
I mean,
There's no way. I'll try and put this as nice as I can. I don't think he's smart enough politically to be able to avoid um, a, a vote in the Commons on confidence, depending how it's brought about. Without the absolute blanket support of Jagmeet Singh, I don't think he'd last, frankly, and then we'd be forced into another election, which I would suggest the majority of Canadians would applaud.
I've got to ask you. I've been putting the question to to my audience on Saga 960. Do you still trust the banking system? And we've been hearing from Andy Lee, who's a friend of the show and a contributor. Check this out. My financial advisor at my bank told me point blank that at this point I need to switch banking institutions. I don't know what they flagged me for, and they won't say exactly, but he said, as a friend, I'm telling you to take your money and leave. This is a lady who had her bank frozen, her assets frozen. She was not able to access her own money in her own financial institution where she'd banked for years. And then on the other side, you have the political ramifications of some of the things that Pierre Poilievre has been saying, pointing at Bitcoin as a viable option for Canadians if they want, if they're losing trust in, say, the dollar. I would suggest that as Canadians see what's happening to people like Andy and other people who had their assets frozen, then looking at something like Bitcoin, where the government really cannot get their grubby little hands on. I mean, it's like you get the banks now in cahoots with the government, punishing people who are seen as maybe enemies of the Trudeau regime. I mean, of course, they're going to look at something like Bitcoin because at least they're going to have some money stashed away somewhere where if the government decides to freeze your account for whatever reason, maybe it's something that you posted on the internet, they won't be able to get that money because it's in a decentralized digital form. What say you on this? The banks look worse every day.
Well, they absolutely do. And, I saw some information yesterday that the Bank of Montreal was writing to certain customers who were involved in the Freedom Convoy in February in Ottawa and telling them they have 30 days to get their money and their accounts closed with their bank because the bank essentially doesn't agree with their politics. Well, I've got a huge problem with that. And frankly, I think that says a lot about the Bank of Montreal and probably their affiliations with the government of Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, well, we heard that other story from Rebel News, and
I
I think
think,
we're dealing.
yeah,
I think they were dealing with RBC.
to
Ezra
circle
was,
back to Andy Lee for a second,
yeah.
I noticed yesterday she had to pay her mortgage with her brother's credit card. It was the only way she could do it so that the payment would actually go through because she's had all of her credit cards and accounts blocked.
Unbelievable. Another tweet from her is, this is a private banker whose services I pay for, and he is telling me to take my money elsewhere because they will not lift restricting transactions on my account. They will not comment on whether the Emergencies Act was used. He says, even if I ask, I will never know. This is the kind of stuff that you hear about in dystopian regimes where people have zero rights. And here we have people being treated in this disgusting way, Leo. This is absolutely intolerable. Absolutely disgusting.
Whatever happened to a free country? Well, that Canada used to be free. It seems that it's not anymore. And companies like the Bank of Montreal are helping out with that.
Billions of dollars left this country, left the Canadian financial system when he, through the cooperation of the banks, and by the way, a hacker who got into the data banks of, I believe it was the GoFundMe people or the Give, Send, Go people, and doxed all those people, made their names known. So this was a criminal act that was used to gain access to the names of the convoy donors. And that criminal act was used.
Which brings up another question entirely.
Yeah.
Are the banks making use of information derived from criminal activity? If so, they're committing a crime, unto themselves, and that should be, something that they're concerned about. I would hope, anyway.
Absolutely, but I guess they're just so embedded in with the regime. Maybe they don't care. I don't know. Anyway,
maybe they just believe that Justin Trudeau's prosecution service won't go after them the way they're going after Tamara Lich.
That's exactly right. I mean, if you have already bought off the police and the media, you got the banks, I guess, in your back pocket doing whatever you want. I mean, it is a really sorry state of affairs in this country right now, Leo.
Absolutely.
But, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Mark. Anytime.
Leo Knight, security expert and former police officer, former RCMP officer, and check out his fine website, primetimecrime.com. Got to take a break. Back with more on News Talk Saga 960 and the Mark Petrona Show after this.